Mela, Saubona, Sakpase, Namaste, Upshin, Dubra Otra, Assalamu alaikum, Hotep, Buenas noches, bonsoir, good evening. Oh, I'm actually going to add another greeting because the brother who is on tonight taught me one the last time he was on, and I forgot it. I'm sorry. We're going to do it tonight. Let me welcome you back to the show. We're going to get right into this topic. It is the end of an academic period for some on this side of the shores. There are countries on the other side of the shores who are still in the classroom, but we're going to have a very, very detailed discourse, maybe a little diatribe, maybe a little debate, but definitely a discussion on education. We're teaching outside of the box and thinking outside of the box. It is my belief that it is our collective responsibility to ensure that our children are provided with educational opportunities in order for them to grow and reach their full potential. Parents, politicians, community leaders, schools, and support organizations such as CAS Prep must all be willing, active, and enthusiastic members of this matrix. This was crafted, culled, and cited by none other than Brother Sam Adewumi, the founder of CAS Prep.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. It's a pleasure to be
Welcome,
here. Thank you, thank
welcome, Brother Sam. Welcome back. Welcome back to the show. So
thank you.
before I move forward, I forgot my word. What was I supposed to say?
Oh, you can say Bawani.
Bawuni. Oh gosh, I'm gonna forget. Bawuni. Thank you. Bawuni. That is officially going to be added to our linguistic calling here.
All right,
Bawuni. Thank you.
Bawani.
So we're gonna get right into this conversation. I'm so glad to have you as our season 2, episode 18 of this show. This is, of course, going to be part and parcel to our educators and thinking and teaching and learning outside of the box. You are a formidable presence in the educational sphere of, as I say, educational support services. Educational or academic support services. I
Yes,
think
thank you.
educational support services is better. And so we wanted to just get into a conversation about where we are now, where we were last
Mhm.
year. It's
Right.
been approximately 2 years and then some of being out of our regularly scheduled academic programming.
Mm-hmm.
And programs and organizations like yours have really been the saving grace to a number of families and the students in terms of trying to keep them connected, not just
Mm-hmm.
connected, but keeping them on a path. What has
Mm-hmm.
happened though is as a result of us not being in a building, it threw a whole lot of people off track, and we are now coming to the end of our first academic term of trying to finish unfinished learning.
Mm-hmm.
How has your organization, and sort of, go back a moment, tell us what
Mm-hmm.
CAP is all about, how it got
Mm-hmm.
started, and how it had to do double time or triple time during this
Mm-hmm.
past year.
Okay, great, great. Again, I'm so glad to be here again to engage in this discussion of education as it pertains to our children. It's something that, I'm very passionate about. It's something that, at this point is what I do. That's all I do, and I love it. As challenging and as difficult as it is, it's work. It's a worthwhile effort. Um, in terms of CAS Prep, we started. It's going to be about 9 years now, um, with our first set of students, and we were initially just focused on preparing students for the specialized high school admissions test, right, which we call the SHSAT, and that's
Also known as the Shizat.
what
Let's
says that,
just call
right?
it what it is, the Shizat.
And just if you're not familiar with this, is that it is the most challenging test that students take at that level. So these are eighth grade students applying for high school. It is the most challenging. It's any of the private school tests or the Catholic school tests. They don't compare to it. the state assessments don't even touch what the SHISAT test. So it's very challenging, very involved, and so we say, hey, what we want to do is create a place for our children to be able to come to get the preparation that they need, so that we can begin to look at increasing the numbers of students of color in these schools. Um, what we've learned in that time frame has led us to the point where now CAS Prep is working with students from third grade through high school, through SAT prep. Because what we realized was that it wasn't just a function of test prep anymore; it was a function of learning. Our students were not being exposed to the learning, to the information that could even allow them to engage successfully in test prep. And so in a few of our years when we first started, we would sit there and do test prep for students who were functioning at sixth grade level, in eighth grade, who were functioning at fifth grade levels, and so what we realized is what we need to do is actually begin to um, build up our children from early on, build them up from first grade, second, third. So right now we are, like I said, third and up. And it's not prep that we do for third graders. Some people think, sometimes they hear about prep programs and they think, oh, wow, they've been prepping their students since they were fourth grade. No, that's not what happens. You can't prep a fourth grader for the SHSAT. What you can do, though, is you can begin to develop the critical thinking skills. You can begin to develop the decoding skills and just the basic informational knowledge, content knowledge that they need, so that when they get into sixth, seventh grade, they can actually be ready for the test prep process, right? But at that point, they are functioning at an above grade level point, right? So, and that becomes the mission. How do we get our students to function above grade level? So again, many times student people want to have their students attend a specialized high school, but once those students come to us, we realize again that those students are functioning at sixth grade level, fifth grade level. And just to kind of make it um, germane to where we are now, throw the pandemic on top of that, and the lack of consistent instruction, the lack of consistent quality instruction that many of our students have faced. Not all, but many have, right? And then throwing the gaps that have occurred as a result of that. So you may be able to do XYZ, but then you're missing ABC, right? And so now that ABC shows up when you're at a point in, let's say in test prep, and you're trying to, um, you know, add or subtract rational numbers that are in forms of fractions, decimals, and percents. And you're like, I got the
Wait,
decimal
wait,
part, but what's this other part that you're throwing into it, right?
wait.
So,
Rational numbers. Oh my God. Sorry, you're sending back to high school. So wait, so let me ask a question. Do you feel, or did you find that over the years parents were, like, I guess you had the biggest peak, if you will, of attendees around the Shizat time, or and now that it's like all year long, or are people still just coming in? Oh, let me get 6 weeks, let me get 8 weeks, but they're recognizing maybe I need this the whole 10 months. What are you finding?
unfortunately, unfortunately, we still have parents coming in summertime is when I want to start prep. All right.
Right, but let's be clear for those people who do not know, the Shizat occurs in what month?
October usually.
October.
Right.
October. It's like the second week of October. So those of you who don't know, let me just throw a little information into this. So my youngest son took the Shizat, and I was just amazed. I was amazed at the information. And some people know in some other communities, people will start preparation for this Shizat in the sixth grade.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will do it in the fifth grade. And
Mm-hmm.
it is very, very interesting how families will still come across and say, oh, yeah, it's August. Let
Mm-hmm.
me get them into a prep program. That test is basically the first week right after. Yeah, about like first, second week of October. So you're
Mhm,
only talking about like 5 or 6 weeks when there
mhm,
could have been a gap of a year or 2,
mhm,
maybe 3,
mhm.
and it's so pronounced, meaning it's so, let's say, quote unquote, advanced, you about 2 years behind.
Right,
You ain't
right,
gonna get it in 6 weeks.
right,
I'm just trying to tell you.
right, right. And it's, you know what, that's so sad sometimes because again, we really meet students who you could say would have the capacity to take on that challenge, but don't have the time because they started so late, right? And there's such a buildup. So there's, again, part of what happens is where the regular school curriculum leaves off and where the SHSAT starts are not in the same place. Now I know the DOE will tell you it's the same things, it's the same things, that's what they'll tell you, right? The truth of it is, yeah, I mean, it's fractions, right? It's mean, but I've never seen that kind of question before, Mr. Sam, having to do with mean. I've never seen a question where I didn't have to find the mean, but the mean was given to me and I had to find some other concepts or some other values around the concept of the mean, which is completely different than what the state requires and what my teacher asked me to do. So how do I do this? Right. And that becomes the issue. That's the unknown piece of this that makes prep important and vital, is that it's not necessarily that your child couldn't do it, but have they seen it before, right? And do they
Right,
understand how to handle this type of problem versus what they've seen in their regular school? And a
right.
lot
So
of teachers says no.
so let me pop in that some people say, "Oh, my child is may not necessarily be strong in ELA, but they're strong in math." But if they can't read the problem
Mm,
because the terminology, not just the vocabulary, but the inferences that exist in the math problem, if the question is flipped, and so yes, usually the mean is given and so you can figure out the other part, but if the mean is not given, then you it's a 2, sometimes a 3-step problem. And if
mhm.
the students are not exposed to the sequence or the flow of the multi-step problem, yeah, they could get tripped up, whether they have to, let's say, add or subtract or multiply or divide. It doesn't just
Mhm.
say divide this. It doesn't just say multiply this. You
Right,
have to infer.
right. And
So
I
yeah,
just want to add, just based on the scenario that you gave, and this is something that, again, for parents, right? When you say that your child is doing well in a particular academic setting, what is the level of that academic setting, right? So your child may be in a fifth grade class, but is that fifth grade class really approaching fifth grade work, or are they doing something a little less, right? And so, again, everything is relative, right? So I'm doing well relative to what I am being exposed to, right? And so, how do we ensure that our students are being exposed to the highest level of instruction and the highest level of challenge when it comes to the type of things that they are being asked to do, right? And unfortunately, again, we will have this conversation with parents, and my child is doing great, 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 and then the first assessment we give them, we're like,
deep breath. So and so, why don't we throw in a tip right here, and you give your tip, I'll give mine. How do you advise families to use a rubric
mm,
to assess whether or not their child is actually doing well without having them step into your program? So, sort of like almost like a pre-assessment to the pre-assessment. Let's talk standards. We don't have to
right,
talk standards, but
right,
like
right. You know
how do
what?
you tell them to gauge?
Um, there are a couple of things out there, within the universe,
Accessible
right?
resources that
It's
families
right. Hmm.
can
So, for instance, I'm going to say one that probably the deal may not really want parents to utilize, but it's out there. Engage New York is one of the sites that has
I'm gonna
um,
type that in the chat.
right. Engage New York has the standards, right, that students are supposed to have for each grade or know for each grade. And that can be challenging to the regular person to kind of read through all that standard work. But what they also do have are old versions of or or snippets of old state assessments, right? So your child is in sixth grade. Before the sixth grade test comes, you can tell if your child is going to do well or not. Just go to an older copy, print it out, and have your child take it.
And that is actually something that people are some people who are like dumbfounded about, no, yeah, just awestruck. Let me say awestruck. That, oh, we can access the old test. As soon as that test comes out, it is now par for the course. You can utilize that. And that's just what I was going to say. Just go to an, or even like a former, let's say a former state assessment, download it, or just have your child look at it on whatever device that you have available, including the smart TV. Yes, I said it.
There you go. There you
Get
go.
your little dry erase marker
There you go.
and just say, hey, okay, can you work this problem out?
Right.
Not just the classroom assessment, but go to what we would call the formative assessment
Right.
and say, if you can do this, then I think we have a chance of you, let's say, dialing back a little bit in order to prep. But if you can't get off of page 1, or if you spend in 10 minutes on question 1 and 2, that might tell you something.
Yeah, and if you're given answers that have nothing to do with the question, all right, I see that so often.
Like I tell my students, we're not talking about penguins. We're not talking about cotton candy and unicorns. It's not even a part of the question. Why are we giving answers like that?
Right. So what I find sometimes, students are great at, I call it conjuring. They conjure, right? And it's really, it's sad, right? Because what it speaks to is they don't have the capacity, that not so much capacity, they haven't been taught, or they haven't learned, or they haven't grasped how to translate words into math. And we were talking about that earlier in terms of the language, of math, right? And that's a skill, outside of just being able to, add and subtract, multiply, divide numbers. How do you know which one you should do for a given situation, right? And our students struggle with that. Again, that's when the conjuring comes up. A few years ago, we had a student who prided himself on his ability to guess. I mean, like, he verbalized this in the class, and I just was like, again, one of those deep breaths.
But how many times was he right?
He obviously was right in his regular school.
Okay. So maybe the conjuring works because the level of rigor.
There you go.
Would accept that, but not on the shizat. Just so I can say, for those of you who are just popping in or you're catching this on the replay, we are talking to Brother Sam Adewumi, who is the president, who is the founder, who is the curator, the creator of CAS Prep. Come on, let me be your hype person. And we're having another conversation about just education. What has happened over the past 2 years? How does CAS Prep, how does it do what it do for the students who are wanting to not just level up, but in some regard to meet the standards when it comes to preparing for, in this particular situation, the SHIZAT, the specialized high school.
Right.
What about?
Specialized high school admissions test.
Right? Thank you. Admissions test. Thank you. Right. But also just to sort of make it through their academic program. And so it's expand to. So maybe we can at some point speak about that.
Right. And I mean, if I was a parent right now in New York City, coming out of these 2 years, I would be very, very concerned. about the level of where my child sits in the spectrum of ability and performance, I would be very concerned. I would be for a couple of different reasons. Again, the interruption that this pandemic had in terms of instruction and the various forms of what it took based on, since March of what was it, 2020, right? Different schools took it on in different ways, right? And then we had 2021 where, most places were virtual most of the year, right? And then we have 2022, 21, 22, where we now have another issue of who's in the classroom and what are they being able to provide our students, right?
Right.
Because having a person in the classroom doesn't necessarily mean you have a teacher in the classroom, right?
I
Um,
agree.
Having a sub in the classroom, there's a, it's not subs are not teachers, you know.
On
So
that note, I need to take a little sip. Wait a minute. Wait.
I just gotta say,
Woo!
you know, subs are not teachers. Like it shouldn't even be substitute teachers. It should just be substitutes, right? I've been there, I've seen it, you know. When I was a teacher, I used to sub. And
Right.
I know, and I could teach, but that's not what you do as a sub. You're a person in the classroom filling up space because an adult needs to be in there. It does not mean that you are teaching, right?
Right.
You
Right.
cannot pull somebody out of an office and stick them into a classroom and say, "We're good." That's not what.
Maybe just look away.
Look, somebody needs to say, because everyone's been quiet about this, right? And the truth of the matter is, I've had students who didn't have a math teacher all year. And then when the state test came, the support organization that was hired became, whoever that person was, became the math teacher till the
Right.
state test was over.
Right.
Right?
Right. Right.
And then they went back to whatever they had before. Right.
Right.
So I would be very concerned as a parent right now.
So let's take a look at like kind of like moving forward a little bit. Moving
Mhm.
forward and this again, as soon as we hit the end of March, the beginning of April, where educators across, and I'll just speak of New York City, were saying, oh, this isn't going to be a 3 week pause. It looks like we may not be going back for another month. And what's going to happen to education? Immediately, when they first said, we will we will be here
Mhm.
until the school year ends,
Mhm.
I started thinking about 2 years later.
Mhm.
3 years later, I started thinking about the graduate or people who are graduating from middle school, from high
Mhm.
school, from college, and starting, educators, of course, and let's say the policymakers started
Mhm.
murmuring about, well, what does this mean for the job market? Let's call it what it is. What does it mean
Mhm.
for the job market? What does it mean? And I said, well, colleges are going to, because it's a domino effect, colleges are going
Mhm.
to have to take some of the academic requirements and put them on the shelf for a minute.
Mhm.
They're going to have to. The workforce, let's call it what is, the workforce is actually going to have to shift their bottom line of what they're going to accept as minimal requirements,
Mhm.
right? And so what does that do for our entire workforce?
Right.
What are your thoughts about how this gap, that's just my opinion, like, but how this gap is going to is gonna
Right.
how is gonna perpetuate itself
Mhm.
in our our city workers, our blue collar, our white collar, our the levels of our economic chasm. What do you think it's gonna do? I mean, I have my own opinions, but I'd love to hear yours, and then we'll get back to how do we can like put some of the pieces together, but we definitely have to put them back together in a different way because we can't expect the biological age of the child, which is connected to the academic grade, to
Mhm.
still meet the same expectations. And I think that's that's been
Right,
like a concern.
right, right. Um, I mean, the truth. I mean, I think that just the truth of it is that the gap will increase. The gaps will
And
increase.
why? Why?
Well, because there are segments of the population. There are students who were still able to perform, who were still able to move through all of that, right? Based on the educational environment that they found themselves in, right? And so there were schools that were able to, again, maintain their flow, right? Um, and and then there were schools that were not. And so when you take those two students and you, from school A and compare them to school B students are not they're not they're not capable of matching up, and just because of environment, not because of capacity or intellect or anything like that, just because of what they experienced and what they had to go through. Um, and again, that's why I would say, like, if I was a parent, I'd be very concerned. I would be very much concerned about finding the gaps that my child may have. Right.
So then, so can I ask, are you then saying the wealth gap
Mm,
will probably be greater? Again, think about the domino effect. If,
absolutely.
right, if student A, student B, let's just take a student, stereotypical public school versus stereotypical private independent, you know where I'm going with this,
Absolutely.
school, and same period of time that they were sitting at home, or same period of time that they were on a Zoom or a Google Classroom or Google Meet or whatever, and then they're leaving high school. Okay, we have students right now who left high school last year, who left high school, leaving high school in the next couple of days, weeks,
Hmm.
who will be leaving high school next year. They're going to be entering the job market. Student A, student B, where are they?
Hmm.
What kind of connections are they going
Hmm.
to be able to meet in order to get that first internship, that entry level job at such
Hmm.
student A, student B? That gap is now gonna, right? It's
Hmm.
gonna just be growing and
Even
growing.
more so.
Where do we see them buying property, renting, going to? What do we see them doing? And I know people who sit high, they're making decisions based on what's happened. They already made decisions in the fourth grade, right? That's
Hmm.
a whole other conversation we can talk
We
about.
know about that, right? We know
But
about
now
that.
there's like new papers being written. There's new policies being written for what's going to happen 5 years from now, 10
Right,
years from
right, right. Um,
now.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the one the one thing I do say is that as a result of this experience too, different opportunities have arisen, right? Different pathways have arisen, right? Um, things that are not, things that are not traditional to
Right.
what we kind of consider, the pathway to success, still have been created, right? And so there are ways, right, for people to kind of catch up, right, in that gap, right?
But
But
how hungry are people?
that's where I am with it. That
How
is
hungry are
exactly that's exactly where I am with it. Because again, you know, I feel like if I'm going back to, if I was a parent during this time, I would be doing everything I possibly could to make sure that my child's education is being taken care of. If the schools are not going to do it, I'm finding ways to do it. I'm finding groups to network with. I'm finding parents to network with. I'm finding support organizations like CAS Prep to work with to make sure that my child is not severely impacted by this, right? We can't sit still and be overwhelmed by everything that's going on to the point that we are immobile when it comes to activating a plan for our children. Right.
So, right, on that note, that, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said people will look towards other parents or other resource people in the community, other organizations, in order to meet that need. I think that's one of the amazing things that occurred probably into the first summer. So at around, end of April, May, June, and I think we may have spoken about it before. What do they call it? Learning pods.
The pods.
The pods. I'm sorry, I'm
Mhm.
going back to sci-fi and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
the body snatches, but the pods. You know what I'm talking about? Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
right. But
The
the pods
pods.
and like how these little cliques of people were getting together. If that didn't light a fire under some bottoms of some families, I don't know what did. I think it was a
Mhm.
beautiful thing that occurred, and we heard
Mhm.
about all of these organic, groups in different communities coming together
Mhm.
and basically just putting their hands on their hips and saying, listen, we have to do
Right.
something. Let's just come on over to my space or sit on my backyard or sit on my
Right.
porch, or let's go to a collective larger space so we can be masked and mathed up.
Mhm. Mhm.
Somebody make a t-shirt about that. Masked and mathed up. Yes, I just came up with that.
Mm.
But they did that, and it was fabulous and it was amazing. And I'm wondering, I know that there are still some of those pods or collective groups, right? Collective work
Mhm.
and responsibility. If we're going to speak about, some principles from the Ngozi Saba,
Mhm.
that still kept that on, and not just kept that on, but grew. So
Mhm.
organizations like a CAS Prep have duplicated themselves in a variety of ways, whether they just call themselves homeschooling groups, whether they call
Mhm.
themselves, like, again, an educational support service like
Mhm.
yourself, whether they said, hey, especially when people were like, okay, in order to go back into the building, you have to have X, Y, and Z. And some families were like,
Right.
not doing it. Some
Right.
educators were like, not doing it. I will
Right.
continue to serve, but I'll serve the people
Right.
who are sitting outside.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that is amazing. And I
Mhm.
totally, totally support it. Children
Mhm.
have to get educated by any means necessary. And I am clapping my
Exactly.
hands by any means
Exactly.
necessary.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
You know, and it's a beautiful thing. And I'm very proud to know you and to continue to know you in your work and to see this mission grow and multiply. And so now what are you doing? Like, now how has the age group grown?
Mm.
Are you
Again,
back in the building? Are you virtual? Tell us what's happening now.
so CAS Prep is still virtual. Um, and our virtual world has worked for us.
Okay.
And I know a lot of people are turned away from DOE because I mean from virtual because they experienced the DOE's version of virtual, right? Um, and and so sometimes when I tell people we're virtual, I know they have an image in their brains of what a DOE looked like, and we are so much not that.
Wait, wait,
Our
wait, 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 wait. Hold on a second. There are some people here who do not know what DOE means. And so, because we're speaking to a global audience, okay? People are in South Africa, in Ghana, in the
right,
Caribbean, in
right.
California. They don't know what the DOE
The
is. Tell them what the
DOE,
DOE is.
the Department of Education, um, that governs, most of what happens in New York City. Um, and again, and it's some of it is based on just what they can and cannot do. So, for instance, one of the biggest differences that we have in our program is we require cameras to be on for our students so that we can actually see them and we can
Yes.
actually see that they are there, right? The DOE couldn't do that, right? It was a camera optional type of thing. So I taught that year camera optional, and all I could, as I taught, all I could think of was how many of my students really are there and how many are like in their bed sleeping right now. At the end of the day, though, I will say that year was great for me. My students actually got so much more work done in that year than they actually did even in their regular year. So I guess they were mostly there. But I think too that has to do with, you know, making those adjustments as an educator when you're teaching virtual versus teaching in person.
And
The
it's a relationship. I mean, when you
the
said that your students showed up, they showed up. Of course, I'm trying to think like a student. But if you have the relationship where you could say, and I'm saying this in love, get yourself out of that bed. Put on some clothes. But you may not necessarily have to take a shower, brush your teeth, but show up, because we
So,
trying to finish strong. And if you have that great relationship,
exactly.
some people play music to kind of keep them going. I won't say who. Some people did it.
No,
And it
I
worked.
look. That is one of the main things I think that coming out of this is the need for as educators to. I mean, we've always known it was necessary, right? You always know, but even in the midst of what we were going through, it was even more important that you build relationships with your children. At CAS, we created this concept called CBT, Community Building Time. And at the beginning of every single session, we had CBT. We had a time that of about 30 minutes or so where we would explore issues, explore current events, go into history, video presentations. We had guest speakers. And the children were encouraged and to ask questions, to participate, to jump in, to speak their minds and voice their opinions about all of the things that we did, or anything at that particular point in time. And when I tell you, in the middle of this, CBT is the first thing we would do. There would be times where in that first minute of opening up the Zoom, 60, 70, 80% of the students are right there. Right
I
there.
love it. I love it. Just
Mhm.
like waiting, like, okay. And I
Just
think I
waiting.
came to one of yours.
Just waiting.
So, like they're waiting in the Zoom room or whatever platform they use. And as soon as you say, you go, okay, let me see
Right,
it's like
right.
40,
Names are
50 kids just
right.
waiting.
Popping in, popping. I'm like, whoa. And this is in the middle of all the craziness, right? And so again, engagement and giving and building relationships and giving students voice, right? Giving them a space to articulate. Um, we did we did we did poetry slams. I mean, you have to be creative. You have to be and use your ingenuity to say, how do I support these students as we are working towards this particular goal. Like the goal didn't change, right? We still have this thing that we have to meet, um, but we have to find a way to speak to them a little bit differently, right? Um, and so that's what we've done at CAS. We've expanded again. Our upper grade level is expanded. We now do high school um, transitions. So we have a course that works from eighth graders to ninth graders, so that we start giving them some of that ninth grade work, that algebra. Then for our 10th and above, we have our SAT program for them. So again, they can start working on the SATs before 12th grade, right? Before 11th grade, even, so that it's not something that's, a hit to them. They start learning these concepts early on. Um, our SHSAT program, we were lucky enough to be able to get, students in this year again, despite the situation. And we were, again, all online. I know some people said, well, we couldn't really work online effectively with our students. Well, we did.
Right. So then that really goes back to, let's say, intention, relationship, because your students are, if you attend regular school, and let's just say regular school, whether no matter where you sit, what, public, private,
Mhm.
independent, doesn't matter,
Right.
you're mandated to do that. You're not mandated to attend an educational support service. It
Right.
is a conversation that occurs between the child and the parent, even though the parent is
Right.
like, you're going. But
Right.
right. But I mean, does everybody get in who tries to come? There is some form of application, conversation. Let's see where your head is at. Let's see, are you ready to sort of be here every whatever Saturday or every
Mhm.
Wednesday night
Mhm.
or what
Mhm.
have you? And I'm sure that there is some vetting that you need to do just to see.
Well, let what we've done. So we admit everyone. We don't
Okay.
turn anyone away. But we do understand that students are going to come to us in different places.
Right.
And so again, we try to speak to that in terms of, what's the best grouping for you, what's the best what's the best starting point for you. So again, one of the things that we learned years ago was that if a child is functioning at a sixth grade level, we can't put them into eighth grade plus test prep. We can't start there. We have to start someplace else, and then we build them up to that point. Um, but we have to kind of really speak to try to get an understanding of where our students are when they first come to us, and then make sure that we have programs that we can slot them into that will speak most effectively to what they need, right? And so they grow, so that everyone grows. Because that's the other thing. Like, you don't want a child sitting there for 6 weeks lost, trying to figure
Right.
out what are they talking about, right? That's like the most unfulfilling thing for a child. And so we want to make sure every child feels like, you know what, I was able to accomplish something in this time that I was with CAS Prep. I was here and now I'm here. I didn't know this and now I know this, right? Um, for us, it's not even about the SHS. I'll just say that, like, it's not about the SHSAT anymore. Our goal, our vision for our children is so much more than that. Um, it's about getting them to a level where, like we said in that quote that you opened up with, where they are being given what they need to be able to actualize whatever it is they choose to actualize when they get to the point of actualization, right? So that means we want to make sure that, you know what, if you're going to be a culinary cook and you need to do some basic math to understand how recipes work and do the
Right.
and do your proportions. You got proportions down. You will understand that. Now you may not be going to Brooklyn Tech, but when you go to wherever you're going to, you'll be like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Right. And that becomes, what we strive for. This year is I didn't express this before. This year is very important for us because we now have our first set of graduating college students.
I was just about to say, like, I want to hear the testimonies. Who, if you 9 years, so we need to graduate somebody. Like, what? Who came out? What they doing?
Look. So they're graduating this May.
Oh,
Out of, and they have, some of them already have graduated, right? Because graduation is staggered.
sure.
But we have a Stanford graduate. We have a uh,
Yay.
one of these DC schools. I can't remember. All right,
American, George
George
Washington,
Washington, right? George
Howard. Okay.
Washington. All right, so we have that. Howard will be next year. We'll get a graduate coming out of Howard.
Okay.
And so that, and they didn't all go to a specialized high school, but
Okay.
they came to CAS, and that work, that foundational work, helped them get through high school, got them to college, and now you know, they're on their way. Um,
Okay. So
they're
wait,
on
so
their
the next
way.
testimonial I want to hear is two of them. I need to hear two testimonials. Number one, how many of them or which one of them is going to not only come back and, let's say, if they're Brooklynites, like they're still back at home, come back and work for you.
Whew.
But the real deal is who's going to replicate.
Mm, mm,
Let's say they moved to a state and then they just stayed there.
mm,
Who's going to call Brother Sam to
mm,
say, I need to replicate this model,
mm,
or who has done that sort of work while they were on their college campuses? Those are the
mm,
three testimonies I'm looking for.
mm,
Who came
mm,
back, who did a
mm,
CAS prep,
mm.
prototype
Right,
while they were
right,
at school
right,
because it was so
right.
beneficial, and who is going to replicate and take it to the next level. That's what
Mm.
I'm looking for.
It's gonna come.
I'm just saying.
It's gonna come.
I'm
It's
so
gonna come.
proud.
Because that has been part of our mantra when working with our students is collective responsibility. You're here because someone decided you were worth building this for.
Yes.
And as you move forward, we need you to make sure that you're looking back and saying, what can I do to support? the ones coming behind me, right? And so that is part of what we practice and what we preach at CAS Prep. Collective responsibility. It is, we are out here for you so that you can be out here for someone else at a later point.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All
Yeah.
right. So those people who are still here, if you're popping in and catching this on the replay, we are speaking to Brother Sam Adewumi, who is the founder and creator of CAS Prep,
Right.
which has 9 years running. You have your first graduating class. I at least want to see the picture on the wall that they give you of I made it, with their
Right.
stole or what have you, that
Right. Oh
we're
man.
graduates of CAS Prep.
Yes, yes. We have our spring luncheon coming up in a few weeks, and some of them will
Oh,
be there. So I can't wait to see them and just congratulate them and let them know how proud we are of what they've done. The one other thing I want to mention about what we've been working on is earlier this year we again looking at what's happening. We decided to start a series of free math workshops. Um, that all you needed was the link to come in. Completely free. It was once a week. Some days it was certain grades were Tuesdays, certain grades were Wednesdays, and our vision is that we want to be able to say, hey, you know what? At least once a week for 1 hour, you can come in and get some solid math instruction, right?
oh,
Um, and
okay.
if you're with us for the period, you will see the different units of study. So let's say, for instance, we started off with our middle school students with integers, and so
Mhm.
we went through adding, subtraction, multiplying, subtracting, dividing integers, right? So something that is a challenging issue for a lot of our students. You know, for some of our upper grade elementary students, we started off with fractions.
Woo.
Yes, that thin, right? Um, that thin. And again, we started from just understanding what a fraction is, right? Making the connections to fractions in our daily experiences, and then looking at concepts of how do we add fractions, how do we subtract fractions, how do we multiply, how do we divide, um from just a basic fundamental concept.
I
um
have to say, I always use sweet potato pies and chocolate bars. That's my base. When I'm talking fractions, I use sweet potato pies and I use chocolate
a
bars.
chocolate bar.
Those people who know what I'm talking about, if you've ever had to try to get a fourth grader, fifth grader into dealing with fractions, you got to use some food. You got to use food to
I'm
get
a pizza person when it comes to that. I know pizza is what everyone uses, but I rock and roll with it. you know,
whatever works. We got to make it work. We got to make it make
exactly,
sense.
exactly.
So
Um,
good. So these free hours. So then, if people go to casprep.org, they can see on the site this link, or how do they
no,
access that? How
not
do they get that?
not not yet, because we kind of ran it as a pilot. But this fall we will have it. It will be on the website as an official link that people can access.
So,
And we'll have a
so
schedule
you could
for.
be at any person.
We want someone in California to account for the 3 hour difference and say, okay, if it's 5 o'clock in New York, it's 2 o'clock here. I'm jumping on at 2 o'clock to get some of CAS Prep's math.
Oh, I love it. So
Right.
then we can refer people for that hour long time.
Absolutely. And again, we break it down. We gently take our people through it, and it's not just for younger students.
I was about to say,
It's
excuse
not
me,
just
you
for.
need a parent portal. I'm not joking. Come
No,
on, let's talk about this.
we
Let's talk
had.
about that new math conversation we had.
Ooh. So I was trying to be nice, right? Uh,
Nah, we don't gotta be nice. Listen,
but
listen, listen.
but But we well the parent, that's another extension. We'll think about that. But we did have parents in the class with our younger students,
Wait a
right?
minute. Why
They
can't
would.
it be parent and child learning together?
That's what
Hello.
we did. That's what was happening. That's what was actually happening. We had sometimes we would have parents right there with their children, and everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody's trying
Listen,
to figure out.
listen, I would just say, here, like get the post-it, write the problem on the post-it, and put it up to the camera like that, and just let me see. Let me see. For me, I had the all of my charts on the wall.
Uh,
Okay, see this? This is what I'm doing. And they're like, oh, really? Now let me see your let me see
let me see what you got.
let me see your post-it. I
Oh,
kid you not.
oh, it was so good. That was the best. Those were the best sessions when I had the parents actually in there
Excellent.
trying to figure it out, giving their responses, and you know, helping them work through things. It was great. So again, another thing, something that can bring the family together. And if you want to support your child, well, the best way to support is engage with them, right? And so now you're learning what your child is learning, and y'all can have conversations about it. You can check the work. Back to what you were saying in terms of our earlier conversation, we do things from kind of like I'm going to say an old school perspective. um
Bring back the old man. Let's get to it. Bring it back. This box method, array method,
Look,
long division.
look, look. You know, here's I was having a discussion with some of my math colleagues today, and it got a little, got a little heated, because yeah, there's people who are like new math, and it's, I tell people, I call old math new math. There's no such thing, right, as new math, old math. Right? Math is math, right? 6 divided by 2 is 3. It was that in 1822. It's going to be that in 2408. Is not going to change. What's going to change is how we try to get that understanding, right?
Of course.
And how we teach it, right? And so, you know, and that's going to constantly change. Um, I think one of the problems with how things have progressed over these last 10, 15 years is we had this monumental shift, called Common Core, that was brought in. Monumental shift. I don't believe that teachers were trained adequately for it. Um, I don't believe that it was properly vetted. I don't believe that there's any theoretical. I mean, there's any of the studies that were done before it was so broadly introduced to say that this will actually work versus what we've had before. And I think and I think the results have shown that we're still not in any better place than we were before, right? Um, so at this point, I'm like, how do we take the best of what we had and take the best of what this offers us and bring the two together, right? Unfortunately, it's, I think what people have experienced is forget what you used to do. That doesn't work anymore.
Hmm.
So I think parents have been told that you can't help your child because you don't know what we're doing anymore. We're on to some new stuff. Well, well, and I'm gonna say, well, if I want to multiply 2,153 by 375, I can do that.
Oh, that's long.
Yeah, it is.
Wait a
Right,
minute.
right. I can do that. And so why can't I show my child how to do that?
Right.
If my child understands the concept of multiplication, understands what we're doing, because and we break this down, and we understand, figure out how to do this. At the end of the day, the right answer will be the right answer, right? And
As long as you show
you
your
show your
work.
work, right?
No, but
And,
don't take 10 minutes doing
right.
repeated addition. That's gonna be a problem. Why are you leaning back and put your hand on your head, Brother Sam? Why you
Ooh, don't say that word to me, please. Please. Right. Because here's my thing too, right? And I don't scalability is always important, right? The processes that I want to show my child now should be the same processes that my child is going to use when they get to algebra
right?
1. It should be the same that they use in algebra 2. It should be the same thing that they do when they get to pre-calculus. It should be the same thing that when they get to calculus. It should be the same thing when they get to differential equations. It should be the same thing when they get to quantum mechanics.
Quantum who? Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying.
I
I'm
stopped. I
just saying.
stopped
I'm just,
with Trig. Trig.
I'm
I
just
mean,
saying.
Trig is all I could do.
All I'm saying is this, right? Like if we are so-called preparing our students to be engineers, because that's where that all comes from, right?
That's
To
right.
be engineers, right? The processes that we're showing them now should allow them to get there. They should not have to switch into a different platform or a different methodology to get there, right? Another example, if I'm doing polynomial division, I know
I remember that. I remember
yeah,
that.
polynomial division is long division with algebra.
Right.
It is long division with algebra. No, you cannot sit there and guess 30 times.
We're
No,
not
you
doing
can't.
that.
You can't. You just can't even do it. There's not a space for it, right? There's not a space for it. So at some point, long division needs to be what they get, right? Because that's going to be allowed them to scale up. Now, some people say, well, they don't understand long division and it's an algorithm. Well, all things are going to end up being algorithms at a certain point, right?
Absolutely right.
All things, right? And yes, so maybe some students may need to start at this point, and they may need to stay on that point a little bit longer so that they get an understanding of what this is about. But then there's some other students who like, I get it. Okay, let's move on. So why can't we move them on? You know. So for instance, I have a third grader who's in my fifth grade math class.
Love it.
All right,
Love it.
right. Not holding him back. Not holding him back. He gets it. Sitting in the third grade class is aggravating for him. He's like, I
Right.
got this, right? So we put him in the fourth with CAS on our weekend program. He stays. He works with the fourth graders, and then that got too easy, and then he jumped into the fifth grade. And then he comes. Not only does he come on our Saturday, he comes to the weekday workshop. And when he comes to the weekday workshop, he goes into the fourth grade class on Tuesday, and then he comes back on Wednesday for the fifth grade class.
Okay. Wait. So, wait. Hold
He's a third grader
on. So he's getting his regular third grade instruction,
at
and then
school.
on went right during the 9 to 2 or 8 to 2 time. Then
Mm-hmm.
he comes for double time. Like
Right.
this after school is academic. This after school is educational support services. And
Mm-hmm.
so he then logs in from let's say 5 to 6, 6 to 7
Right. He
on
logs in
Wednesday.
on Tuesdays is 5 to 6. On Wednesdays is it's the same. Yeah, it's the same. So Wednesdays is 5 to 7, but his section is the 5 to 6 section. So he'll come in on Tuesday 5 to 6. He'll come in on Wednesday 5 to 6. And then he stay
How
on the weekends with the full program on
and
Saturday.
how long is the weekend program? I mean, how long of the Saturday is the session?
The Saturday sessions are from 9:40 till 2:30.
Wait a
So
second. People are sitting on the Zoom 5 hours. Mr. Brother Sam, brothers, hold on. This sounds like a whole day of remote learning in the
it is a
past.
whole day. It is a whole day. It is a whole day. But
But
it's
you
broke.
have like 30-minute sessions to go take a 5 minute break, 45-minute sessions to go take a 10-minute like
Well, again, the breaks are in their classes. So remember, we have CBT, That's like 30, 40 minutes. So that's one
Okay.
activity, right? Before they even go to class, right? And then
Okay.
they go to class and in the morning, they'll spend 2 hours in either math or ELA. And the teachers, they'll get their breaks, but they'll do, they'll rock out in their classes, they engage, they communicate, they challenge each other. Um, you know, if they don't agree with a given answer, it's like, I don't agree with that. I think it should be this, right? So they have that morning experience. Then they get their break. Then they come back and they have another hour of whatever the other subject is that
Okay.
they didn't have. And then we have a great partnership with um oh goodness. Um digital girls, right? And so they have
Ooh.
coding, Digital Girls Inc.
Okay. Okay.
And they have a so we've been partnering with them for years. They are phenomenal. And so then they have a whole coding program that they work with in the last hour of session. And
Wow.
so again, so they're moving, they're working, and it's like they're not sitting still for that period of time. The mind has been constantly absorbed with different things, right? And so when it's time to go, it's like, is it time already? Um,
I love it.
yes. So it works out.
So CAS Prep has grown. You have had your first set of graduates
That's
that
it.
can now, I want to say gadgets, but your first set of people who have walked across the stage, even though it may have been the digital stage, but if they've gotten onto a campus, they did it, and they did it as a result of CAP.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is a lot to be proud of. I really hope that people will follow. Please just look right there, www.casprep.org. Please follow Brother Sam Adewumi, who is, again, the founder, the creator, the man with the plan, who has done it, I'm sure that you are going to continue to be a success story, and that all of your students are going to look at you and just say, yes, it is because he
Yeah.
and his family believed in me and brought me here and got me connected, that we have more, because this started because you saw the lack of Black and brown faces, or the number of Black and brown faces that really could have been sitting at the Shizette, and then also going to the specialized high schools. But now you're literally ready to, as I say, push the live button and go global, because if you're saying that this little Zoom link can be afforded to everybody, then yes, we're not talking about a 3 hour people from Cali popping in. We're talking about people from the other side of the
There you go.
world popping
There
in
you go.
order to get
There
that
you
math
go.
work.
There you go.
As
There you
long as
go.
you got Wi-Fi,
There you, that's
you can get these
You can
digits.
you can get these, right? You can work with us. So as long as you have Wi-Fi and a device, let's do this. Let's do this. Now, and again, when I said earlier, new opportunities that have come out of this time, to me, that's one of the new opportunities. We can now teach anyone from anywhere in the world. Okay, we just gotta, work out the time differences, but we can rock and roll. We can rock and roll.
Let's call it like save the videos and then put them in a vault.
Yes,
That's
that's the
another
next.
conversation
That's
to have
that's
another
that's
day.
that's coming in the fall too. That
There we
definitely
go.
coming in the fall. Yep, absolutely.
Much love, much love. Thank you so much for the people who have stayed with us during this time. There are still people who are rocking with us. I appreciate you. My name is Doriel Inez Larrier of Larry's Education and Resource Network, where I plant seeds to help you grow. And this has been season 2, episode 18, with none other than CAS. I'm doing it right. CAS Prep right here in this building. Brother Sam Adewumi, who is I'm trying to think of a quip way to say it. What is my brain going to give me? Let's just say mathematical force to be reckoned with out here in these academic streets,
Mm.
these academic digital streets.
Word, I appreciate that.
He's closing the gap. He's getting more people to sit in the room who are and getting more melanin popping into the Shizette rooms, and then more melanin popping into the specialized high school, specifically in the New York City area, but because he is crossing the digital divide and going across
Mhm.
the Wi-Fi waters, come on, I really need to be the hype person here, okay? Um, he is now going to be expanding. So please come see him in the fall of 2022,
Yes.
where long as you have Wi-Fi and a device, you can be
Yes.
in Istanbul, you can be in
Yeah.
Nigeria. Ah, did I
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
Nigeria? Did I say Nigeria? You can be on the South Pacific, you can be in the Caribbean and get your math on.
And get
So
the math on. Absolutely. Absolutely. We have fun with math. We have fun with math. And I do want to just last piece as we're ending, for the parents who have students who are thinking about the specialized high schools, do not wait till eighth grade. Do not wait till seventh grade. Get them going from six at the latest. Get them going into, and again, not test prep, but into a program that's going to accelerate them, right? So that when they're ready for test prep, they're ready for test prep, right?
right.
And then they could walk into it versus trying to make these big leaps into test prep. And it just becomes such an easier process. And the percentages of children being successful with that 2 year versus a 1 year is amazingly different. It's phenomenally what 2 years can do to the chances of a child getting in, if they are in a in a program that's set up for that, and that's what one of the things that we do.
So let me sort of do some forward thinking. If
Hmm.
you know, and this is to the families out there, whether it is your own child, your grandchild, your mom and them's child, the neighbor down the street, the kid you see running up and down the block, the kid you see yelling outside your building or whatever, but you know that they really have a head on their shoulders.
Mm,
As you were going to the fifth grade graduation,
mm,
okay, or if you were a K to six school, your child was in a K to six school, as you were going to the sixth grade graduation, in the car that you write, at the barbecue
mm.
you go to. Okay. Like for real. Let's not just celebrate them and say congratulations for what you've done, but here's what's going to prep you for the next step. I know you may
Mhm.
not be thinking about high school right now, but guess what? Or thinking about college right now, but guess what? This
Mhm.
will at least give you that additional leg up. And you, again, before it was just focus on people who are in the Brooklyn area because you were physically housed. But now you need Wi-Fi, you need a device. You can
Mhm.
totally tap into CAS Prep, and that's what we
Absolutely.
want people to do. Let us
Absolutely.
multiply the masses and get this math on.
There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go.
Much
Absolutely.
love. If anyone has any questions or comments, please drop them in the comments below. We will see them and we will be able to respond to them. If you are listening to this, please just contact casprep.org, CASPREP.org, and Brother Sam or one of his staff members will be able to get in touch with you and let you know which button you need to push in order to get this math on. Peace and blessings. I look forward to seeing you all next week. We are back on track. Once again, this is the Learn to Grow You moment where I plant seeds to help you grow. I love you all. Peace and blessings.
All right. Thank you, sis. Thank you. Appreciate this.